Hey everyone! Today I'm going to tell you about one of the most interesting empires from the ancient world, the Achaemenid Empire. Our story begins east of the Zagros Mountains, in a vast high land that stretches all the way toward India. While Egypt was busy fighting off some invaders called the Hyksos, groups of animal herders were moving down from the north, near the Caspian Sea. These groups didn't just stop, they kept going, with some even making their way deep into India. Then, during the time the powerful Assyrians were building their empire, a second wave of these migrating tribes settled between the Zagros Mountains and the Hindu Kush Mountains. Some of them built homes and became farmers, while others kept their traditional way of life living on the move. These groups would later become known as the early Iranian people. Because these tribes didn't have things like police or courts, they followed a strong code of honor to keep peace among themselves. Their beliefs and religious views were different from the settled farmers in places like Egypt and Mesopotamia. In those areas, people worshipped gods who protected cities and were tied to natural elements. But the Iranians were more focused on larger ideas about right and wrong. Around 1000 BCE, a man named Zoroaster helped shape their thinking. He taught that there was one main god called Ahura Mazda, who created the world and stood for truth, light, and order. This idea became part of their culture. Even people who didn't fully follow Zoroaster's religion still grew up believing that being honest and doing the right thing were very important. As time went on, some tribes grew stronger and began to lead others. One of these groups was the Medes. They built their capital at a place called Ecbatana, which means meeting place, and used it as their base of power. In 612 BCE, their king, Cyaxares, joined forces with another group called the Chaldeans to destroy the great city of Nineveh. After that, they expanded even more toward the northwest. Then something really strange happened in 585 BCE. While the Medes were fighting the Lydians at the Alus River, the sky suddenly went dark because of a solar eclipse. Everyone was so scared and confused that they stopped fighting and agreed to make peace. Not long after that, Cyaxares died, and his son Astyages became king. One of the regions under Median control was Persia. This area was located southeast of Ecbatana, beyond a region called Elam. Persia had around a dozen different tribes, and one of them was called the Pasargadae. Their leaders always came from a family called the Achaemenids. In 559 BCE, they chose a new leader, Cyrus II, who would later be known as Cyrus the Great. Here's where things start to get really exciting. Cyrus was actually the grandson of King Astyages, but that didn't stop him from wanting Persia to be free. By 552 BCE, Cyrus had brought all the Persian tribes together and started a rebellion. In 550 BCE, when the Medes tried to fight him, their army switched sides and joined Cyrus. With their support, he marched into Ecbatana and took control. Cyrus called himself the King of Persia and decided to build a capital city at the place where he won his big battle. He named it Pasargadae, after his own tribe. But now, Cyrus had a much bigger problem. He was in charge of a huge and very diverse empire, filled with people from many different cultures, languages, and beliefs. Some nearby kingdoms, like Lydia and Babylon, had made deals with the Medes and were now uncomfortable with the idea of a Persian ruler taking over. The king of Lydia, Croesus, thought he could stop Cyrus. They had a battle near the Alus River, but it ended without a clear winner. Croesus then went back to his capital Sardis, expecting to rest and fight again when spring came. But Cyrus didn't wait. He surprised everyone by marching straight to Sardis and capturing the city. Lydia was incredibly rich and important for trade. In fact, they were the first to make and use coins. All of this wealth now belonged to Cyrus. Surprisingly, Cyrus didn't kill Croesus. Instead, stories say he let him live and even asked for his advice. This was something no one had done before. Back then, most rulers killed their enemies to show strength. But Cyrus believed that mercy could be powerful too. He became known for being wise and fair, asking defeated kings to help him govern their lands better. This idea of treating people kindly was new and unusual, but it worked. Cyrus's next and biggest challenge was Babylon, one of the most famous and powerful cities in the world. Instead of attacking it with an army, Cyrus used a different strategy. He spread messages saying that Babylon's king, Nabonidus, was unpopular and didn't care about the city's traditions. People in Babylon started to believe that Cyrus might be a better leader. When Cyrus arrived, the people opened the gates and welcomed him. Once inside the city, Cyrus showed great respect. He joined in religious ceremonies that the old king had ignored and returned sacred objects to temples throughout the land. This made people feel that the gods approved of him. Cyrus then made a kind of agreement with the people. They would pay taxes, and in return, they could keep their own religions, cultures, and traditions. This was a big deal. In other empires, rulers forced people to follow their own customs. But Cyrus allowed freedom, and that made people more loyal. He even helped the Jewish people who had been taken from their homeland and brought to Babylon. Cyrus let them return to Jerusalem and gave them money to rebuild their temple. This act was so important that he is mentioned in the Old Testament in a very positive way. It also gave him an ally near Egypt, which was helpful for keeping peace in the region. Cyrus ruled in a way that was completely different from other kings of his time. Instead of forcing everyone to be the same, he allowed people to be themselves. His empire became a place where many different groups could live together in peace. For the first time, it seemed possible that a large and diverse empire could actually work. Cyrus wasn't born into the old city-centered cultures, so he was able to see things from a new point of view. And because of that, he was able to make his vision a reality. And after Cyrus, his son Cambyses too took the throne and added Egypt to the growing Persian Empire. It was a huge achievement, but his rule didn't go smoothly for long. Back home, a man pretending to be Cambyses's brother, someone Cambyses had secretly killed, started a rebellion. The impostor was actually a Median priest, who used the confusion to his advantage. Cambyses rushed back to deal with it, but he died on the way, leaving the empire without a strong leader. That's when one of his generals, Darius, stepped in. Darius wasn't from Cyrus's direct line, but he had royal blood and the army's support. He crushed the rebel and took the throne as Darius I, later known as Darius the Great. But his problems didn't end there. Revolts broke out all over the empire, and Darius had to fight hard to win back everything Cyrus had created. Backed by the Persian nobility, who had grown wealthy through empire, Darius restored order and even pushed the empire further east, into the rich lands of the Indus Valley. That area brought in more wealth than even Babylon. Darius understood something important. An empire this big couldn't survive without good organization. So he split the empire into 20 provinces, called satrapies. Each one had a governor, or satrap, often someone close to him or part of the royal family. But Darius was smart. He didn't let any governor become too powerful. He appointed a separate military commander for each province who only answered to him. On top of that, he had spies known as the King's Ears, who kept an eye on everything and sent reports back through a system of roads and post stations. These roads helped messengers travel fast and keep the empire connected. He borrowed some of these ideas from the Assyrians but took them to a whole new level. One thing he really changed was how tribute worked. In older empires, people paid tribute just to stay safe. Darius turned it into a tax system. He used the money not just for war, but also for building things that helped everyone: irrigation canals, mining projects, and a giant canal between the Nile River and the Red Sea. He even created a single currency, which made it easier for people to trade and work far from home. With all this money and talent from around the empire, Darius began building a new capital, Persepolis. It was designed by Persian architects and built by workers from all over the empire. Each piece of art and architecture showed the many different cultures under his rule, but all tied together with a Persian touch. Persepolis wasn't just a city, it was a symbol of everything the empire stood for. Even though Darius followed many of Cyrus's ideas, he didn't really talk about Cyrus much. Maybe it was because he wasn't directly from Cyrus's family and wanted to prove himself. As his empire grew bigger and richer, Darius gave himself a new title, Shahanshah, or King of Kings. He didn't just want to be king of Persia, he wanted to be the king above all kings. That title matched his vision of a ruler who stood above local traditions and united everyone under one rule. It was still in line with what Cyrus started, just taken to the next level. But things started to get messy. In 499 BCE, a group of Greeks in Ionia rebelled against Persian rule. Darius crushed the rebellion, but then tried to punish Athens for helping the rebels. His fleet sailed west but was surprisingly defeated. That loss made the empire look weak. To fix this, Darius raised taxes to build a stronger army, but this move backfired. Places like Egypt began to protest. When Darius died, his son Xerxes I took over. Xerxes had a lot to prove. His father and grandfather were great empire builders, and he wanted to match their glory. But he ruled with more pride and less patience. In 482 BCE, people in Babylon rioted over tax increases. Instead of calming things down, Xerxes destroyed their temple and melted down a massive gold statue of their main god Marduk. That moment marked the end of Babylon's importance. Using the gold from Marduk's statue, Xerxes began preparing for another attack on Greece. In 480 BCE, he launched his massive invasion. But he rushed things and ended up suffering an even worse defeat than his father. After that, Xerxes seemed to give up on leading the empire himself. He stayed in his palace, surrounded by luxury, away from the people. Cyrus had once acted like a traditional Mesopotamian king when it served a purpose. But under Xerxes, the Persian court actually started to become like those old royal households, full of wealth, hidden behind walls and distracted by palace drama. The empire was strong enough to survive this for a while. But slowly, the cracks began to show. Some satraps started acting like kings in their own provinces. Inflation rose as taxes increased. Even the empire's diversity, once its greatest strength, became a challenge. The army was made up of troops from all over, each with their own languages, weapons, and traditions. That made coordination harder during war. In 401 BCE, Cyrus the Younger, who ruled parts of western Persia, tried to take the throne from his brother, Artaxerxes II. He hired 10,000 Greek mercenaries to help him. The coup failed, and Cyrus the Younger died. But those Greek soldiers managed to return home, bringing with them detailed knowledge of how the Persian Empire worked. That information would prove valuable years later. By the time Alexander the Great arrived in 334 BCE, the Persian Empire was still standing, but it was no longer the same empire Cyrus and Darius had built. It had been the first to truly organize how different peoples could live under one rule. It set the idea of what an emperor should be and became a model for many future empires, from Rome to Britain. And when Alexander dreamed of creating his own empire, he looked back to the example set by Cyrus, the man who had changed everything.